Hey guys, this is the Mistwar podcast, and this is Puppet.
And I'm Criff.
And today we will be discussing the scoring system and victory conditions for World versus World. What we like about it, what we dislike, what we think fails, what we think works, and even looking back at previous versions of it. Such as, I'd like to get this out of the way first because I know that seems to be a hot topic. The old Glico system. Do you know anything about it, Criff?
I remember when I was first playing World vs. World, it was just this mysterious system that the guild leader would look into the crystal ball and try to guess who we were going to be fighting against the next week, because nobody really understood it.
I remember one time when I was on CSROs, I think this was 2016. We were in tier 4 and it was reset time, and some guy in the not Discord, but some guy in the TeamSpeak said, we're most likely going up to tier 3. But according to the Glico system, there's like a 2% chance we're going to go to tier 2. And of course, one of my guildies was like, okay, so you're saying there's a chance. And it just so happens that we actually went up to tier 2. And I don't know the actual percentage reasons, or like, I don't know the actual Glico reasons of why we went up, but it, let's just say it wasn't a fun week. Our server was definitely not ready to go up that far up.
And that's a good point too, because at that point the tiers they meant more, because you did have to do more than one week to actually get up in a tier. It wasn't just, oh, we won this week, we're moving up.
Because that was 2017 when they changed the Glico system to a one up, one down, which I think everyone was wanting. But honestly, looking back, I feel like the servers were more balanced when there was a Glico. I think it just caused more static matches though. Like 2015, every week it was Maguma, SBI, and Crystal Desert that fought for like months. And I get how that's boring, but it also felt fair. Probably more fair than it feels now, how like a server now can just be asleep and or even just kind of let other servers pass them, just let them win for the week and go up in tiers, and it causes these just very, very unbalanced feeling matchups for weeks at a time until finally, nature takes its course and gets leveled back to where it's supposed to be.
It is easier to manipulate, yeah, because I mean the good side is there's more variety. You do get to fight different servers, whereas before it was kind of static. You were stuck wherever your ranking was. But it also is easier to manipulate. I mean, yeah, you can have your server just not get any points on Friday and drop in the rankings intentionally and beat up on smaller servers.
Well, I think that's where, a lot of server drama has happened as well, is servers, I feel like there's more drama now with how you can just let servers pass by, or people get a misconception of where their server's supposed to be in a rank, or just in the ranking system as a whole, just due to servers taking a break for a week. Because it's not like back in the day where a server could just be dead for an entire week, and it's the Glico system. They're going to lose points, the rating, but it doesn't mean they're going to necessarily go down in a tier. It doesn't necessarily mean a server below them is going to come up, because the skill points could have been so spread apart. They could have been the gap could have still been like too wide. That and I think that probably caused more fair matches than we have today, and it's definitely caused a lot of drama because people will purposely tank. You'll see servers. I know you've experienced servers that are supposed to be like in tier 2, tier 1 are tanking all the way to tier 4 and just terrorizing everyone with blobs or really skilled guilds, and or servers go up to like tier 1 that really shouldn't be there, that should be like tier 3, because the tier 2 and the tier 3 servers were just like, well, go ahead.
Yeah. But what we're talking about is kind of the actual structure of World vs. World and the points and how they work. and how people actually are able to improve the score of the server and how they get points from different factors that actually happen in the game, what kind of roles people can fill in the game to get points for the server.
And just people's opinions on winning conditions, because almost any server you go to or guild you talk to is going to have a different opinion on their winning condition. Like, for me personally, I care more about KDR than I do about PPT or war score or victory points. That's just not what I care about due to the lack of rewards.
And for those at home, what's KDR?
Kill death ratio. I mean, just like you'd find on Call of Duty or any other first person shooter game, or yeah, I generally like a first person shooter game. And PPK would be points per kill, which is another way. There's PPT, which is points per tick, which is like capping towers, capping camps, killing yaks, and then there's points per kill, which would be every single time you kill a player. Those both determine into the war score, which at the end of a 2-hour scrimmage, there's one every 2 hours around the clock. When that ends, depending on whether you take first, second, or third, that determines how many points you get added into your victory score. And the side with the highest victory score at the end of the week is the one that either that goes up, or the second place stays, or third place goes down, and so on and so on. And I mean, this has been going on for, I think, almost 4 years at least with the 1-up 1-down system. Obviously Guild Wars has been out for 8 years, but at least for that system. And it's always such a debate on what is, like, is the system broke? Is the system working? Is there anything we need to do to it? Does it need to be reformed? So actually, yeah, that's actually my question right now. What do you like about the current system?
Well, the movement of the guilds up and or the not the guilds, the movement of the servers up and down does feel like you have immediate impact in terms of if a few guilds or a few commanders, or sometimes even just one person, like really going to town at the right time, if they push hard and they cap a ton of camps and a ton of towers repeatedly, a ton of keeps, they can actually make a difference and boost the points to the point where, yeah, the server might actually go up. So it's, and that can be a negative sometimes, but it is kind of cool that maybe you haven't really done this in a long time because it's not really your cup of tea, but there've been some Fridays where the score is just like down to the wire close,
Mm-hmm.
and different guilds are working together and people are pushing really hard and getting everybody online playing, and it feels quote unquote like the olden days, sometimes competitive, where you really are trying to deny the enemy points and just really hold our things and get everything upgraded and capture as much as we can without incurring any losses, just in time so we can push for whatever reason, or to get the right amount of points to get in second or third, whatever we're going for that week.
Well, I even remember that wasn't too long ago. I mean, I guess it was a good some months ago. It was probably like 6 months ago or something. There was a match. There was a matchup we had because I was on Darkhaven with you, that we were coming to a tie, and we realized 20 minutes before it ended that we were going to tie. And I remember messaging an old guildie of mine that used to be an ANET employee, and I was like, "What happens if we tie? What happens if we tie?" He's like, "Wow, that's really rare." He's like, "Hold on, I gotta figure it out." And he's like, "Oh, you're gonna fight again." He's like, "You in that server." I don't remember exactly how it exactly worked, but we ended up fighting that same server again. So we both servers stayed exactly where they were, which I actually thought was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't seen that in forever, and you don't hear that. So that was definitely an interesting week, and I do know earlier that day, like you said, it was by the wire. Like everyone was like pushing because uh, we really wanted to move up, if I remember correctly. We wanted to move up to because another server was coming up that we really didn't care to fight. So we wanted to move up. So we ended up fighting that server, if I'm not mistaken, but we also fought one of the same servers we already had. So the servers that were above us like stayed. It was weird, and probably has only happened a couple times in World versus World history.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a really unique circumstance that nobody really had an answer to as to what was going to happen. Yeah, that's not often that you get those really close matchups, though. I mean, it's here and there, and it's nice when they come together like that. But it's not as often as I'd like. I mean, most of the time it is lopsided. There's clearly one or even two of the servers that are just steamrolling the other guilds. Most of the time in points and in kills, and by Wednesday even, you can tell who's gonna win.
Well, that is one difference I've seen in EU is the PPT, the scores are a lot more similar. They're very more like competitive. I don't know if you've ever checked that out before, but you should check out World v World stats. Just one random week. Just start checking the stats of like the EU servers and just see how close the matchups are. It's a lot closer than NA, and I think it's because a lot of the EU guilds at least want to they want to push. They're really big about the PPT game. I'm gonna get flack for saying that, but it's just true. They're really big about playing the game mode, and there's nothing wrong with that. Whether they're getting it from points per kill or points per tick, they're really big about beating the enemy server, and so they're pretty competitive. While NA, a lot of times it feels they have an agenda. They're like, oh, are we pushing? Nah, let's go down. And you find a lot of times NA servers are trying to tank more than they're trying to win. Like winning doesn't seem to be a big theme, at least in my experience on NA. That I don't remember, but a couple servers that really wanted to win. They were just more about manipulating the matchup and who they wanted to fight.
Yeah, that became pretty evident a few years back when it was possible on certain guilds for people to actually sway things that much. But on a lot of servers, it's not possible because there's a lot of people that are just going to play how they want to play and continue playing, and it's not really going to change no matter what you do.
Well, that's like we.
So,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, no, it is. It is. I think there's a. I mean, if EU still functions as, quote unquote, the game's intended and everybody's trying to win and NA doesn't, there's not much to explain the difference besides cultural differences and the evolution of guilds and things, because it's not the actual game mechanic, it's the
Yeah.
people in it.
Yeah. I don't think there's not inherently any problems with the system. I mean, we could go later on. We could, always go into like lack of rewards and incentive to win, but the actual system. If everyone logged on that day and said, "We want to beat this server," there's nothing wrong with the system. There's nothing busted. The only thing I can really think of is overnight populations. And that's another discussion in itself. Like you can spend all day in NA time and you tier everything up and you've got all this siege build and people are refreshing all day. It hits midnight NA time, like EST time, and everyone's asleep. I mean, well, maybe not midnight EST time. Let's say midnight Pacific time. Everyone's asleep, and then OCX guilds, and then alongside them after is the C time guilds, and those guilds come on and just they take T3 keeps that don't even get contested. Like no one even shows up to even stop them. And a lot of times that can definitely push a score left or right. Like some servers almost bank on that. You watch their NA population, you're just like, oh well, they're really struggling in NA. Like they're barely keeping afloat. They're like in third place on war score, for 6 hours straight, and then it hits the overnight, 12-hour stretch, and oh, they've got a big overnight crew, and they landslide win because of it. And you wake up that next morning, you log on, you're like, what the heck happened?
Yeah, Yeah, from the beginning, I think that's always been a big factor is coverage, time coverage. Does our server have commanders and people willing to follow commanders and scout and roam and defend things all day long? Because the server doesn't stop when we're sleeping. There has to be someone there still defending our stuff and holding things together. And if the server doesn't have people from different time zones or even other countries across the oceans, then you're at a disadvantage because the enemy servers might have those people.
Well, that kind of goes into like that you were talking about roles and stuff. When people play the game mode as intended, there's a lot of different aspects of the game that open up. There's roles to it. Like, scouts and roamers play a role more than just being, pew pew rangers from a wall. People capping camps. Especially if you've got a scout slash roaming group that they've been told something, especially when like a server communicates and they've got a goal in mind. They're like, I've got to go cap camps. I got to go kill yaks. I got to go escort yaks, and those really do add up. Honestly, those I bet add up more than taking SMC does.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, that's one of the missed pieces that a lot of people don't realize. If you do the math, capturing SM, the giant castle in the middle in Eternal Battlegrounds over and over, does not equal the most points. Definitely not. The capturing of many little things across multiple maps, way more points. So when guilds actually know this and they are going for points, they will actively avoid fights. They will not try to fight anything because there's the chance they would lose and give points to the enemy from points per kill.
and one wipe and like one wipe, and you take into account like points per kill, can mean like 2 SMCs potentially, or even more. Because I think SMC baseline is worth like 30 points if I'm not mistaken, or maybe that's upgraded SMC. I don't remember, but an upgraded SMC, if you hold it, is a good amount of points. But I do think that if you were just clearing out a map and escorting yaks and killing yaks, that's going to be a lot more points than SMC is going to accumulate in an hour. You could get more done in 30 minutes than SMC is going to get, probably in about an hour span. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's other aspects into capping things such as Garrison or Stone Mist Castle, which is SMC for anyone who didn't know. It's the main castle, the main objective that sits in the middle of the map, Eternal Battlegrounds. It's a very big hotspot for fighting almost all the time, and most groups that tag up, that seems to be their first objective when they get on the map is, well, let's go cap it. And I get that from a content perspective, but you're probably right from a actual winning perspective. It's probably the most irresponsible thing to go after, especially for how long it usually takes to cap due to resistance and fights that will happen from it.
Right. There's an idea of opportunity cost, and right, yeah, you're really 9 times out of 10 are not going to sneak into the biggest castle in the game and capture it with no opposition, because there's 2 other servers that are trying to do the same thing. So it's not going to be easy. You're definitely going to lose some people. You're definitely going to exhaust supply, siege, etc. But also time. The 3 times that you go after SM and die and wipe everyone, you could have been on some other map capping towers over and over and over with no resistance and gotten more points.
Which, in my opinion, is kind of boring, but I mean, it's how the game mode was created. It's how the system was designed, and there's nothing. And as I said, there's nothing inherently wrong with it or broken with it. I just think, in my opinion, sometimes the system fails to really create fights. A lot of the system really encourages, it basically encourages groups to just blob up and go on the outskirts and, mass build siege, cap a tower, waypoint out, grab siege from their keep, run out and do it again over and over and over and over and over. And that's not broken or necessarily abused, because I guess it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, because that's just the strategy. But it definitely isn't appealing to a lot of players. I mean, it's definitely it's appealing to some, but I definitely know that there's a big chunk that complain about it all the time, and they think that is where the system fails. So it's not necessarily that the system's failing; it's just it's failing to do what people want it to do.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, the point system incentivizes capturing things quickly, easily over sometimes even defending things or fighting enemy groups. And the lack of incentive for fighting enemy groups is a big one. But yeah, no, it is kind of where the point system doesn't really make everyone happy. There are a lot of incentives there that don't really appeal to the same people, you know.
Well,
And that's hard to balance out. I mean, everybody wants something different from the game mode, and that's always going to be a challenge. But I think the points at least are better in how they reflect things because it used to be just a total sum over the whole week, and then they did change it a few years back to the skirmish system where it's 2-hour chunks. So even
yeah.
though yeah, that's I feel like that's more beneficial because you at least can say in these 2-hour chunks that I've played, I did my best. We came together. We got the most points. And
Well,
then you can blame other time zones for losing. You know?
well, that at least that I agree that did help some because yeah, you're right. It used to just be there was a war score, and every single time you got points, it just accumulated it, and at the end of it, whoever had the most war score. Now they designed it where there's a 2-hour skirmish with all three servers fighting for war score, and every 2 hours, everyone's war score starts at 0, and whoever has the most at the end of it is awarded a certain amount of victory points, and victory points are the determining factor for winning, which I do think that is a better system because you're right. Now in the World versus World tab, you can go look at previous skirmishes and you can look at the kill death ratios, you can look at the PPT scores, and you can actually see what each 2-hour window did. So the blame game is a lot easier now. So you really can just you can score down. Oh, what is this? 0.2 KD. Oh, I see. I see who did bad, and that definitely could cause some trouble. But it
It's interesting that is in the game, and a lot of people don't know it's there. Like a lot of servers and different people I've talked to talk about KDR like it's a bad thing we shouldn't mention and don't talk about that, you know? Because oh, originally it wasn't in the World vs. World screen. People just had to use the API and do math to figure it out. But no, it's there broad as daylight. I mean, you can totally see which servers are going up in points but still have a terrible KDR because they're just throwing bodies at it and just dying and dying and dying repeatedly and getting farmed.
and I think that's the interesting thing is how people they look over KDR. They look over the kill death ratio so much, and I think the kill death ratio, I think it definitely does account for something. In my opinion, a lot of times it accounts for how strong a server actually is at like holding itself together. Because you're right, a lot of servers will just zombie mode cap things, and they'll throw their bodies at it until they finally cap it. And the server that has the highest KD is kind of just sitting in their own territory waiting for that 40 50 man blob to come back, so they're not really capping anything. And while they're doing this, the other servers obviously off like zerging other things as well, but they come right back and they wipe. And honestly, I feel like points per kill can determine skirmish better than capping things, at least for something like a reset night. When you've got one of those reset nights and you've got 3 zergs on Eternal Battlegrounds, a lot of times the strongest zerg, the one that's basically farming everyone, is going to win the matchup. Or it could be another map as well, but PPK during peak hours is arguably more important and more valuable than points per tick. But that requires players, and I think that's the reason some people find the system so broken, is that if there's no players, then things can be capped uncontested and they're still getting full points for it, which kind of mess up their. They don't necessarily mess up the tiers because it's always been like that, but in people's minds, it's messing up the tiers.
Yeah, there's imbalances in how the points are distributed due to those, coverage factors and this and that. But man, if there was a higher weight placed on kill death ratio or something like that, that would be interesting. If
I, I'm telling
bonus
you,
points, something like that.
make them worth 5 points or 10 points or something. It would change it. I think guilds could win entirely just by killing people, and that, in my opinion, is a stronger feat than a 50-man blob mass building, like running around a map and waypointing around until a group gets tired of chasing them around, and then them just finally run it to a tower and capping it in 2 minutes, and then all waypointing out. Like, this is supposed to be a war simulator. I'm not saying to get rid of siege. I'm not saying to, you can't cap towers for things, but it's supposed to be a war simulator, and that's where I have to agree with people that I feel like the system fails to truly simulate a battle sometimes, because people will just do the whole, waypoint out tactic immediately, and I don't want to say abuse it because they're not really abusing it. It's just it's such a boring play style to win. But a lot of
Yeah,
times it is the play style that's needed if you truly want to win for the week.
yeah, and they'll call it K training, karma training, whatever, and these groups will just go to capture things over and over and over and over because it's maximum rewards. I mean, just like in PVE map, you want to win the events as fast as humanly possible, and not do any that you're maybe going to lose. And man, it just makes for boring gameplay. I mean, I I think that might be some of the split between the veterans and the newer to the game mode, because when you're first in there, I mean, yeah, we're busting open this gate with a ram. That's cool. And oh, there's a catapult over there. I'm gonna play with that and throw rocks. And you're going in. You're capturing a tower. You got a reward. Great. And then after like the 100th tower, it's not really any different than the last one. I mean, yeah, are you getting stuff? Are you getting rewards? You got your participation going. Cool. There might be some camaraderie in the squad that's fun. But after a while, it's just not that interesting. Like, the only thing that makes World vs. World unique and cool is the enemy players. I mean, you can go to Drizzlewood or whatever meta and do similar stuff of capturing things and get more loot, but the interactions with enemy players and actually fighting other enemy groups of unknown size is what I think actually brings people back. It's not just bulldozing towers over and over and hoping nobody shows up. I don't. That's where the goals are different, but that's no longer fun to me. I mean, I know it's not to you.
No, no, not at all. And there are definitely, I think, less guilds now, or there's starting to be less guilds that really care about that. But I know that there are still those servers and those guilds out there that's what they care about. Every week they're like, how do we win? Well, we got to do this. And like, they might fight on reset. They might even fight on Saturday night, but it hits, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they're like, full blown karma train. We're capping everything. And they'll do in my opinion, the scummiest, boringest tactics to just cap everything in existence. And the second they get under attack or they even get slightly caught, they just waypoint out or they run inside their nearest tower and immediately build a bunch of arrow carts and bunker down. Even if they outnumber you 2-1 or something, they do this. And I know that everyone complains that every server, you've probably heard this all the time. A server gets mentioned, everyone says, "Ooh, that server's siege humpers. That server's a bunch of siege humpers." Here's a quick information for anyone who's new to World vs. World. Every server is a siege humping server. There's no server out there that doesn't siege hump.
It just takes one random person, just one random person running in there and building 10 arrow carts. There's no limit, I mean, there is a little limit on how many you can build in the tower, but one person can do all that by themselves if they want.
Well, I mean, how much I'm against like siege and teaching people to rely on siege, but it gets obnoxious when you're running with a group and let's say you're running like a 20-man group and you chase like a couple pugs into a tower. it's like 5 dudes, and they run up there and they immediately hop on a cannon and shoot a cannon at you, and someone just has to say like, "Stupid siege jumpers!" Like, what do you mean? we outnumber these guys. Like, it's different when they outnumber you, and that's when it's frustrating for me. But it's dumb to be like, how dare that guy use that siege as intended, and that's where I think there's issues with siege that have been encouraged by the method of winning the siege is one of the using siege is one of the strongest methods of winning the matchup because just how strong defensive siege is. But I don't think there's actually a problem with siege necessarily. I think it's just the way people use it. It goes back to the whole karma training. It's nothing wrong with people running around as a 50-man blob capping towers over and over, but when it's encouraging people to not fight and they just immediately cap the tower slash wave at you or slash laugh and then waypoint, I don't understand what they're laughing at. I don't understand what they're waving at. Like, they didn't do anything. You essentially went into a PvP mode and you're playing PvE.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that'll I mean, I guess they're happy because they made you salty and they know you're not going to get their bags.
That's almost enough reward in itself, knowing that they know I was gonna kill them. But
There's a lot of screwing with the other server and like denying them victory in some way or lowering their morale. Little weird actions, I think.
that's definitely one of my favorite things to do. Could ask any of my guildies. Every single time we get caught and I'm near any type of terrain, like if I know like we're just about to die, I'll always yell, "They're not gonna take me alive," and I just like jump, dodge, roll off a cliff or something. Just I mean, I do it as a joke, but I also partly do it because a lot of times people, even when you're getting attacked by 30 people, when you're running a really tanky stat, it just takes people 20 years to kill you. And you'll sit in downstate for 10 seconds and you're just sitting there like clicking the waypoint over and over. Like, am I dead yet? Am I dead yet?
I would love a tracker in game that specifically tracked deaths from falling.
That
Man, I know it's got to be near 50% for me.
that would actually be really funny to look at. Or deaths from falling. Is there any other type of death that you could add to that?
Oh,
I don't know. The amount of not just falling death. I want to see how many people have died from jumping off something with their mount.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Where there's no glider and hoping there's a glider.
People just forgetting what terrain they're in. That's a big cause. But back to roles. I know we kind of briefly talked about scouts and stuff like that, and how many points they can get. I still think that even that system, even the role system, isn't a bad thing, and I think that's where what's it called, just the system, the system of World versus World and the winning conditions, where it at least attempts to encourage people to have different roles. Then and everyone can accumulate points in their own way. You have the pug banners who can K train. They can go massively cap towers. You have the roamers that can go escort yaks, kill yaks, cap camps. And then you have fight guilds that can go around and try and get a big chunk of PPK. And there are definitely hours and times and days where one of them is like PPK is lowered, and it's like I said before, it points per kill almost have the highest potential, but that requires you to actually kill people. And if people don't fight you or they just run away, then you're kind of denied that. And I think, in my opinion, there needs to be some higher reward, like we mentioned, some other incentive to fight, because I think though killing Doliacs and capping camps and mass capping towers isn't abusive or you're not really abusing the system. I think it's so easy that the simplest act of fighting is so discouraged amongst numerous servers and numerous guilds.
I think positive reinforcement is really the way to go with anything in this game. Like it's rewards. If there was something super duper fancy shiny incentivizing people to kill other players, like a unique item that only drops from an enemy player's bag, or bonus rewards if you're near a big fight. I don't know, but they could do quite a lot to incentivize that, because man, I think that's what people want when they come in World vs. World. They're wanting to see huge battles and take part in them and kill people. But
Well, it does feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I could just be totally in a elitist talking out my butt right now. It feels like a lot of a lot of the commanders and guilds that don't want to um, fight seem to be a lot of the old guard. The guilds or commanders that have been around for 8 years, and they were around when points per tick meant something to people, and there was no link servers, so having a server home meant more, and they hold on to that, and they sit there and formulate plans to be able to cap as many things as they can as quickly as they can to win the matchup. And I think it butts heads because then they communicate, they try and communicate this, and they're met with memes and harassment almost because people, a lot of the newer players and even some of the old people, like a lot of the fight guilds and stuff, they're just like, well, what's the point? Like, that's we've been doing that for 8 years. It's so boring. It hasn't changed. Nothing's new about it. Well, just like you said, you cap your first tower, you cap your first keep, and it's amazing. And then 100 more later, you're like, what? what do we do now?
yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of quote unquote high school quarterback syndrome where people get stuck in a certain time frame of the game where it was most fun to them, or whatever the victory conditions were at that time, or whatever they want them to be. And there's not a lot of looking at the wider picture and all the different pieces that are working together. And
I mean,
man, talking about the roles, like the scouts and the roamers have always been kind of neglected a bit on the kind of recognition / reward, because there's I mean, I've played all the different bits of World vs. World. I don't know about yourself specifically, your history, but I did the scouting, I did the roaming, but a lot of defense. That's kind of where it was the most fun, and that's where a lot of conflict comes too. I think with Fight Guild specifically, but the people that are and a lot of this I think is kind of evolution of players / guilds as they're in the game mode, because you'll see people change their interests over time, but you get in and you learn that swords appear on things when they're under attack,
mhm.
and you can go and you can you can see there's a group there and put it in map chat, and then if you type just the right thing and there's a group available, they'll come and kill them all, and you feel like you saved the day. So that, I think that kind of progresses to actually more self-sufficiency and trying to actually be able to engage those people and fight them on your own, and then people evolve to more group fighting, and they evolve to actually get in comms, they evolve to actually use builds instead of making up their own or using something that's worked for them in PvE. And then they finally become your salty veteran Fight Guild person that
Yep.
forgets about all that and is grumpy.
Yep. That's pretty much the cycle. You're in there. It's brand new. It's cool. You get into roaming. You dabble in scouting and these things, and you either become a grumpy PPTer scout that wants to win for some reason, or you become a grumpy Fight Guild member that hates everyone except their own guild. I'm pretty guilty of this, and I I think that's just how the cycle of World versus World has kind of gone, and I think that's just the roles that the system has created. And like I said, I don't think it's broken. I don't think it's bad. It's just part of it, and I definitely think there could be improvement upon it. I think there's small and big changes they could make to PPT, and like I said, we could always talk about rewards later. There's definitely a lot of things they could do to create and solidify these roles better, and them not be so at each other's head. And the ecosystem would probably be more healthy. Like scouts, I think would get along better with fight guilds, and the PPT more minded guilds would get along better with the fight guilds that were just looking for fights. And you find there's small moments of these guilds and communities getting along, but ever so often they butt heads and drama sparks, and that sparks transfers or excommunication. That causes a lot of that stuff, and it's so dumb to think that it's all caused just because of how this system has been set up. Even something like, you know this, take the scouts for example. Bad scout calls can cause so much drama, because then you lose SMC, or you lose a keep, or you lose anything like that. Like, lose a big objective. That a scout makes a bad call, fight guild doesn't show up because call wasn't accurate, or was underplayed. Then PPT guild that tiered that up, and that sat there and built siege in that, and escorted all the acts, they get pissed at the fight guild. And the fight guild's like, that was a bad roaming call, or like scout call. And it's just, it causes such a cycle of
Hmm.
I don't know, fighting. It's the simplest way. It causes a cycle of grief, and people just at each other's throats.
Yeah, there can be a little high stress environment on some of that stuff with certain map chats. I think it's some servers it's stronger than others, but yeah, I mean it's gonna happen. I think in any kind of team based environment like that. But the thing that makes it, I think, worthwhile is kind of the actual interactions and the personal relationships that you get after a while, and then the silly drama. I mean, it's kind of entertaining. Like
Sometimes
it
drama's
is.
good. Sometimes it's good to have a little bit of drama. It keeps things interesting, because like, I don't know if I've said this on the podcast, but World versus World doesn't get content updates like Living Story does. The content is created by the players, which is good and bad. It means, first of all, it means we don't rely on ANET to give us a new patch. Not that ANET, if you're listening, it's not, doesn't mean we don't want something. You can give us a new map anytime. But it does mean that we don't require them to do that. When you play the story, you run out of content. When you play World versus World, you don't know what could happen. Another guild could show up. You could transfer to another server as well. Different interactions take place. One from an outside view, you could have just fought 15v30, and someone could have just been like, oh, that one guild just wiped that one guild. But to the guild's view, you could have just got like the saltiest, angriest whispers, and it just made that fight way, on another level than just being a pug following it or something.
Hmm.
And you don't get that in PvE. So even with its faults, even with the scoring system faults and the way that everything's set up, World versus World has this. You're right. It has that community aspect that most MMOs, and especially other aspects of Guild Wars 2, doesn't have.
And I think it's lost on a lot of people. I know it is. I mean, a lot of the people that do not engage with guilds in Discord, or ever join a guild, the lone person sitting in a tower or whatever, they don't even know that part of the game exists. I mean, there's a whole world of people out there, and interactions, and silly squabbles, and awesome teamwork and jokes. And I've told people before, like, commanders, I kind of feel like are Dungeons and Dragons dungeon masters, and they're coming up with adventures for the group to have fun with. And
Yeah, I haven't ever really thought of it like that, and it's kind of true. You kind of, I mean, there's a limit to it, but you kind of are just creating your own little adventure every single time you tag up in World versus World, or even when you go roam around and Havoc. You just go in and do what you want. And I think that, like we've said before on the podcast, that's the beauty of it. That's what keeps people coming back. The drama's nice, the combat, obviously the combat, in my opinion, is the best combat in any MMO right now, but it's the interactions with the community. It's how close knit the community is, yet so big that keep people logging on this game every single day and dedicating time. And I maybe that's another way I should approach it. Maybe this is another way you should approach it as well. Is people we've said people are going to play the game how they want to play, but I find what keeps me on the game every single day is definitely the community and the aspect of logging on and creating a team that's competitive and wants to be competitive against other teams just for the sake of being competitive because I enjoy the community, enjoy the game. Maybe that's the same way that PPT guilds are. Maybe they log on and they just love that feeling of capping everything and owning everything when the enemy server doesn't, and the interactions, the social interactions they get with that, the community interactions, and that's just legitimately what they find fun.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's kind of why we have the game, and different people are allowed to enjoy different aspects of it. But the good thing about the game mode is that there is some encouragement for teamwork there, and it's pretty cool to have a common cause, and that kind of camaraderie you can get with people as you're hanging out, taking towers, or killing mobs or killing players. It's still good. It's still nice to do things with other people, and yeah, that's what I think the game is all about, and why it's called Guild Wars and not Solo Person Wars.
So solo queue wars. Well, I think we're gonna be closing out here in a minute, Griff. But I did want to say something about scouting. If there are people out there who really enjoy scouting, I really encourage you to actually scout and do your best to give accurate information to it. And any pug commanders or any newer commanders or even veteran commanders out there, get them in your squad and give them squad participation and try and communicate. I understand there's fight guilds out there that don't want to do this. That's fine, but if you're going to be a pug mander, if you're wanting to be a server mander, that is such a not just, in my opinion, a needed thing, or it's also just a good healthy thing to have, because I think it creates a better dynamic between those roles. Because I think a lot of scouts get really angry because they feel like they're being ignored, and some people don't want to scout because then they're like, well, I'm missing out on pips. And I think that's why that shared squad participation was created. It wasn't created for people to just leech as they AFK and go make chocolate milk. It was created for scouts on the map that are, or even on other maps, because it goes map wide. It even goes server wide, actually. I don't know if you've ever known that, Griff, but you can actually, someone else could join your squad and be in World versus World on a different server, and they could still get participation.
I did not know that. That's very interesting.
There's actually, in one of the underground communities, they pay certain commanders 100 gold a week for people that leech, which because people want to get pips and stuff, but they don't really have time to play World versus World, so they like AFK. They basically just like keep tapping their computer, and they're doing something else, and they might be working or playing another game, and they get their pips done. And I'm not encouraging that at all. Like, I mean, if you're one of those people, that's fine, whatever. But
you're telling me I could have been selling pips this whole time?
you basically you sell squad participation, and I mean, it's actually ran by a couple big names in the community. But
that's funny.
The last thing I wanted to say was, if any of you guys have any questions that you want us to answer, we're gonna start a little question segment for like the last 5 minutes of each podcast. Leave them in the YouTube comments, and we will definitely answer as many as we can in that time frame. You got anything else, Griff?
Just thanks for all the comments and the words of support and all the suggestions that we've gotten for different topic ideas. We've got plenty of material we can go over for plenty more shows. So
too much material.
Yeah,
we've got to watch ourselves.
It's been fun though.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Remember to like and subscribe, and go download a game that we're not actually sponsored by. Go download
Come play with
Guild
us.
Wars.
Yeah.
Go download Guild Wars 2. It's free. Well, kind of. All right, guys. We'll catch you next time.